Dharamnarayan Dasgupta's world in modern Indian art is a delightful world. It is a world of suspended reverie where he uses irony and satire very effectively to point to the power inequalities in society or just absurdities of life. He would present these images of babus or bibis, these Bengali Bhadra lok that are floating in the air with different objects floating around them, and you don't know the narrative. A significant aspect of all of his works is how he draws these figures. They all are corpulent bodies, they're well fed, the women are always voluminous, the saris are sort of wrapped and floating around them, but down to their rings and their the buttons in their kurtas and their nose rings and their jewelry and the bindi on the women's foreheads. These are arrayed, turned out perfectly, and the artist mocks some of this keen and self-obsessed sort of attention to the self. This could be a fantasy of maybe an idyllic, romanticized world. This world soon also started to incorporate these mythical or semi-fantastic creatures. This is a magic realist world. It's very hard in work after work of Dharamnarayan Dasgupta to really get directly at the narrative. And at first glance and at first appearance, all is well with this world. There is nothing threatening, there is nothing disquieting about this world. But in the 70s, once Naxalism began in Bengal and the large-scale violence and deaths and murders that took place, they started to, and the disillusionment that the people began to feel with those in power, even with radical movements, these started to come through in his paintings through some more darker themes. This was a period that began to reveal a lot of macabre elements in his work. So you had the floating babu or an animal, but the figure would be headless. Once he began with some of these darker themes, he began to use them in ways that were initially a lot more disturbing, but then later grew to a juxtaposition of more visible comic themes where they are interacting with animals or with divinity, and where that babu or the bibi is just a local Bengali person and not necessarily representative of the Bhadralok. A stronger palette where he would juxtapose blues or pinks with greens gave way later to a little gentler and harmonious palette where the figures emerge out of the ground. You have areas of light and dark, areas that are flatter, that look more translucent, and some are just opaque, which has much to do with his technique of creating this in tempera, and especially with that mouth spray. Another extremely important aspect of his art is his mastery of the miniature art form. And so in his art, you see this juxtaposition of sometimes childlike drawn trees or objects in the background, and at other times extremely detailed, again, trees and flowers and bowers or gardens of Eden, where the theme and the treatment are from miniature art. But with Dharamnarayan Dasgupta, it's the symbolism of the different elements, the mirrors, the clocks, the umbrellas, the vintage cars, the butterflies, the dragonflies, the elephants, things like that are floating, which he uses directly, and the jewelry, for instance, on the babus and the bibis, which communicates their wealth and their status in society. These are people lost in their own worlds, who are very funny and oblivious perhaps to how funny and absurd they are. He uses the symbolism strongly to communicate how at odds they are with reality around them, and that's what underscores the absurdity that he wishes to communicate in all of his paintings.